Here tonight. Thanks everybody. Super excited to have our secondary schools here to present their site plans. We'll adjourn here shortly at 6 o'clock for the record. We've got 3 board members in attendance. Mr. Carrion and myself are here in person. Ms. Pendergraft is joining remotely. Ms. Hollowell and Mr. Wiggins couldn't join us, but they did announce they couldn't make it, so we're aware of that. Anyway, just for logistics, we've got things set up in the D pod, which is down that way, similar to what we did in the winter, 3 rooms. We're going to be listening to belonging goals, student supports, and academic goals. If you don't have one of these things, you don't know where to go, then talk with me or AJ, or Merritt has a bunch of them too. So anyway, after that, we'll reconvene, come back here and talk about what we heard, what we learned, and takeaways and so forth. So we're ready to go. Let's do it.
So we're talking about belonging. That was one of our major board goals at Summit Trail that we looked at. There's little signs in our hallway. We went through some of this in December, some of these things. So Paul, next slide, please. So some of our people that are participate in coming up with this plan. Next slide. We really started off again by focusing on just making it personal and personalizing this work of belonging. Next slide. And we had a goal. We wanted 100% of our students to demonstrate a high level of sense of belonging, school safety. 100% is pretty high water. We're really more philosophical than realistic in looking at that. But we got pretty close. When we look at some of the questions that Summit Trail asked in our survey data of, I feel welcome and included in my classrooms. Scores are in the 94 to 96 percentile of agree or strongly agree. I feel connected, supported, and respected by teachers. Again, 95 to 96 from the fall to the spring. And so we're getting a lot of good results on there. One area that we're not there yet, and one of the things we're learning, is that while we're getting a lot of high attention that my teachers know me and teachers care about me, one thing we're still working on is students feeling safe expressing their feelings and their personality at school. Some of that's maybe a little bit of a middle school concept where middle schoolers don't really feel comfortable. That's part of where they're at in their maturity in growing up and sharing their opinions, ideas in the classroom. And so we actually worked with some of our counselors to interview some of the students who were in kind of they strongly disagreed with the fact. And one of the things we learned is that some of them felt that their views were polarizing, were extreme to one degree or another degree, and weren't accepted in those ways. But what we try to do is, again, to personalize learning, to make learning something that each student is relevant to each student. And that's kind of where we've learned we're making gains, we're making progress. Go to the next slide, please. Again, we're kind of blending together the Tahoma goals and Tahoma cares with the idea that we're also doing work with UDL, and then we'll talk about that in another session. But we're talking about universal design for learning, which really is teachers focused on personalizing, giving students choice and voice in their classroom. And we felt that through that process, kids feel that they have more of a sense of ownership in their learning and the direction, the pace of their learning. And so we've seen some successes there. Go to the next slide, please. So what we're really going to talk about in terms of what are we learning, what's moved the needle, what hasn't moved the needle, is kind of found on this slide. And it's a slide that has equity, web, and clarity on it. So I know, Haley, you may be looking at that on your screen. One of the things we're going to talk about first is around some of the equity work that we did. Really, one of the things our teachers wanted and were looking for is classroom strategies on how to support students when something is happening in the hallway, in their classroom, how to help students interact with others in a way that wasn't so much out of an emotional state, but really in a part of bringing everybody together, bringing a sense of understanding, even though their viewpoints and their values may be different, here's some opportunities to kind of seek middle ground and seek a level of understanding. And one of the things we had Dr. Hollins come in, and she kind of worked with one of our classes, and we gave to all the teachers, and we actually as staff taught, it was just a simple four little booklet, four little things to remember. And they are to interrupt, question, educate, and echo. And we really felt that those were good starting points just to kind of focus in on, like, why did you say something like that? Or what did you mean by that? Or help me understand why you feel that way. And then as you get to understand like how to make people feel good and not feel bad, then it's an opportunity to kind of echo and to kind of reaffirm that this is one of the things that we want as part of our school, and we want a positive environment. So again, those were things that we learned really helped make a difference and move the needle, because it gave teachers and students common language to use. When someone feels hurt or not heard, or think that somebody else is being hurt, an opportunity to go in there and have a conversation and not raise and not get to an emotional place where there's really hurt feelings or there's anger or frustration, and kind of as a way to get in before that and have good conversations. Yeah.
Can I just clarify? So are those four kind of strategies that you just highlighted, those are classroom strategies that you're presenting to the classroom as a group, is that correct?
Yeah, it's the classroom strategies that we taught to our staff to be able to use in their classrooms or when they observe things. And we kind of went into a classroom and modeled that behavior. And that was
What did you call those four things again?
The four things are interrupt, question, educate, and echo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Another one that's working well, and I'll get to clarity, which is kind of looks like the third one, but I'll get to clarity, is just as we had students return back from school, they had to learn how to do school again. And that's happening at elementary, middle school, high school. And one of the things that really made a difference is actually leaning on some of our middle school teachers that have elementary school experience, who have actually talked and trained students on how good behavior looks and sounds like in a classroom. That was very successful. And then that was something we, again, shared with more staff members, because again, when you explicitly teach them, here's the behaviors, here's the things we're going to do, you get the outcomes that you're looking for. And so we really started doing that, more of that, whenever there became an issue or something that we were trying to get better at in the classroom or hallway. It's just doing some more explicit teaching. So just clarity, having opportunities to do check-ins, having opportunities to just go through some of our UDL strategies that we were getting better at. Those were all things that move the needle and make things better. Another thing that made, I think is going to make a difference is our web team. Our web stands for Where Everyone Belongs. And today we brought two of our web coordinators, Branda Almley and Bree Doherty. And they're going to talk a little bit about the web team and what that program is and how we're thinking about this making the school an even better place.
Yeah, so Branda Almley. Hi, I don't know if you can see me.
There.
I got the privilege of being a web coordinator in 2016, 2017 was when it was presented to us. And so web has been part of our school climate since we became Summit Trail Middle School in 2017, 2019, so this is going into our 6th year. And we started out with 2 coordinators, myself and Katrina Allegato, and it was a huge undertaking because it truly is a transitional program for incoming 6th graders to feel at ease, welcome, comfortable before the first day of school ever starts. And so we were excited and energized to bring this program to a new school, to a new format, and we quickly realized that 2 people was not enough for the job. So we recruited Jeff Grassley and Pete Smith, who joined us as well for 2 years. And then we had that unfortunate situation with COVID, but still tried to create the web the best we could online, and we adapted, and kids did everything they could to do Google Classrooms and reach out to kids, because we still wanted our incoming 6th graders, who at the time were 5th graders when COVID shut down. They were the first group of students that lost Camp Arnold. They lost that 5th grade graduation ceremony, and then they didn't get web. And so we felt like we've got to do something to make these sixth graders feel special, like they are middle schoolers, even though they're coming during a time when they're actually not on campus, they're not seeing other students, they're not with upperclassmen. And so how do we keep this web program going? And, I think we did the best we could. And now this year, our current seventh graders are those sixth graders that came in during COVID, and we just recruited 72 seventh grade web leaders for next year. We have the best outcome of any year I've ever recruited. We have the most boys. It's the most multicultural, multiracial pockets of every representation among our campus, which is really what web is supposed to be for. We're not looking for just, that studious academic leader. We're looking for somebody that when a sixth grader comes on our campus, they see them and they go, that looks like me. I belong here because that web leader looks like me, and I can talk to them, I can relate to them. And so we are excited. We've gone to all the elementary schools. We're gearing up. We just had our spring play date where the seventh graders got to go through the activities and really understand why their leadership is going to be critical in the fall. And so we have the spring play date done.
Yes.
We've got our web leaders recruited, and we're getting ready for the orientation, which is going to be the day before school starts.
Hi, Bree Doherty, and I'm going to be kind of talking about the future of web and where we want to take web as a program. And historically, web has been amazing for orientation, but we want web to live in our school year-round. So we are excited as web coordinators to be able to go to a training in the fall to be able to ensure that we carry web and the spirit of web throughout the entire year. And we also want to continue that training with our leaders. So we are talking about strategic placement for web leaders in different stretch classes so that they are learning more leadership skills, maybe through Character Strong or just different collaboration. And that also gives us the ability to pull web leaders when we need them in terms of like new student orientations throughout the year and just different activities that we want to do with our sixth graders. We also want to partner more with our ASB and get our students excited, our sixth graders excited about all the things that ASB has to offer through our Run, Rock, Read, different socials or things that sixth graders may not have experienced ever before, and this is all new. So we want to give them a heads up and encourage them to join and be active participants in our community.
And we really want to just partner web with ASB and Belonging and Character Strong and make it more of a universal approach in our building versus just operating in our different worlds and realms. Up until this point, we've had a lot of things get in the way of that collaboration, but we feel like we're at a really strong point where we can start taking those steps in the right direction.
Yeah, that kind of is a good transition to some of the things that we're still working on in terms of belonging. And one of them is the fact that we have a lot of programs, web, our Character Strong with our ASB, Future Ready Skills, that are doing some of the same work, but are working with different vocabulary and working with different leaders, kind of in a silo. And what we hope to do is to have a shared language, especially around the 6 social emotional learning standards. And that's going to be a learning for next year, is to continue on and make sure students and staff are aware, and parents are aware of the social emotional learning standards, and how, if we can have our web team introduce kids to kind of, here's how you behave, here's what good students do, and then you're able to support them in leadership and support them in the classrooms with future ready skills, and you're able to talk about your bare expectations that we've done for years. All of a sudden those things start overlapping and become more powerful rather than operating separately. So that's something we're still working on. We're not there yet. And that's kind of an MTSS tier 2, or it's kind of the idea of how do you help support those kids who are struggling. They're not behaving the way you want. Well, there's an opportunity maybe to do a Future Ready Academy or some other either push in or pull out models to help support those kids. But again, another thing is just the absenteeism this year. The absenteeism of both students and staff have been tough to really develop an ongoing sense of belonging, ongoing sense of community. and we're hopeful that that's gonna transition in the next year. But that's some of the work that we've done in terms of belonging this year. I'm really excited about some of the steps we made along the way, but our job's not done, because every year we'll get new students and we'll have to connect in new ways. But if we can get smarter about how we do it and more efficient, then it makes everybody's life better. So, is there any questions?
I don't know who else is in the room, so I don't want to jump in front of anybody.
Haley, go for it.
Oh, it's just you.
Yeah.
Okay. So just out of curiosity, when do the web leadership team, when do they meet the kids?
The leaders, they've met once already, and they've gone through the application process, and then the training day will take place 2 days before school starts on that Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, they meet with the sixth graders from 8 to noon. And that's an amazing event to see if you have the opportunity to come on campus. And then school starts that first day. And then from there, we plan to meet at least once a month as a leader group, and then once a month with their cohort group with their sixth graders. But as we haven't gone through the fall training yet, this will be the first year the web coordinators go through the fall training. And so we're going to learn how to implement web throughout the whole year. That's the missing piece that we haven't had in the past.
So are you envisioning kind of like an ongoing meeting then? That would they meet after school, or would it be at lunchtime, or how do they?
Yeah, that's a great question. So everything with web is operated within the school day because we don't want to eliminate access for anybody. And so we meet during stretch, and if we have to push into a class, we rearrange the schedule. But so far we've been able to manage that stretch time. It's fast, but it's meaningful when we can get the kids.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then Mike, should I ask my other question?
Keep going. You're doing great.
Okay. So going back to, and thank you for that web work, that sounds just great. I love leadership type programs like that. Kids just thrive in those environments, and I love that kind of work. So thank you for that. That sounds just awesome. If we go back and we look at that group of kids that back in the fall, when we first did these site plans and these meetings, the group that does not feel safe, and that's the one where we really haven't seen the needle move much. Is that what I'm understanding? Is that
Right.
okay? So my question about that would be, just to clarify, that's where you're kind of doing more of that personalized learning, right?
Well, I think we're doing personalized learning for everybody.
Okay.
It's, I think when I asked the three counselors at Summit Trail to go and to interview the students about, we'd like to learn how we can help you feel like you belong more. I'd like to learn how, what we can learn from you. And there was a variety of answers. There wasn't really one solution. You guys did, or two of them that did the interviews. Mm-hmm. How would you characterize them?
Yeah, Haley, it was really interesting. Part of what Sean was talking about is developmentally, some kids read that question and it's just like they don't feel comfortable with their own self in their world. And so they automatically feel like I don't feel safe to really speak up. There's that population of kiddos that will always feel uncomfortable, embarrassed. But then we had one group of students who feel kind of in our LGBTQ community that just feel like they're trying to find their belonging. And then we actually had, surprisingly, on the other side, some very politically right side kiddos who feel like they can't voice their opinions in school because it goes against the mainstream, and so they're feeling shut down, like they can't voice their opinions, and everything kind of in between. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like that question of, is it possible, but how do we keep it safe? Like, how do we make kids feel like they can speak up?
Sure.
And we just pondered the fact that, is it developmental? Part of that too.
Yeah, that sure seems like
Because we
it.
want to
So-
give every student a voice. The fact that their voices are different and from different perspectives is a good thing.
Yeah.
We want them to have the conversations in a productive way, though. And
Yeah.
middle schoolers tend, as their age, tend to kind of lead with their emotions and lead with some of the things, the hearsay and some of the slang. And if we can give them the right language to kind of have conversations, hopefully we can be more productive.
Yeah. So are you feeling like you're drilling down kind of on that group where they just haven't really moved then? Kind of that middle piece of kids that is just not, they're not like outliers, but they're kind of in the middle and haven't really moved in their safety piece. Like how do we, I guess I'm wondering like what are you thinking would be next steps for those kids and how do we measure if those steps are working or not?
One of the things in counseling we do, Haley, is we normalize what feels totally abnormal at their age. Because a lot of kids will come in and say, everybody hates me. I can't talk to anybody. It's this very globalized viewpoint of school. And so what we try to do is just really kind of help them normalize it that, well, let's actually look for evidence. What evidence you have that that's happening? What evidence? And, when we can kind of get them into their rational brain and have them start to consider other options, it takes that rapport. And so one of the things that we know with our middle school students is the building of rapport with staff and with their classmates allows them to start to take those risks. But for some kids, it takes a long time. And for other kids, they jump on board pretty quickly. It's those kids who really take a long time that we just have to continue to check in and just say hi every day, know their name, make them feel comfortable, notice when they're not at school. Like that's just as important as noticing when they are. Mm-hmm. Do you want to add anything?
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to tell you guys, like, you are the true heroes of our community. You've gotten these kids back into the schools. They're so, I know, they're so happy to be there. And I appreciate you so much as a mom and as a community member. And then as, and sitting in this position, I can't thank you enough. And as being a previous teacher, I know you've been through the ringer this year, but you've made a lot of kids smile. And I can't thank you enough for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Bill Weiss, Principal of Mapleview Middle School. I brought our team here in the back. Mr. Miller, there's Sean Seeley, one of our math teachers.
Sure.
Matt Brashear, as you met, instructional coach. Megan Foreman, our expert and student wellness advocate. And then, of course, Robert Talbert, our assistant principal. Rob and Megan are doing most of the talking here. This one we talked about in the fall. One of the things that came up really quickly was just student behavior. And we framed it in the phrase of wanting to improve their scholarly habits, but it was something that was just felt like a big lift for us in the fall in addressing not just classroom behavior, but Tier 3 students and school-wide system behavior. We've had time to kind of reflect. We've got more data in front of us. We have found some things that have worked, some things we're still working on, and we have some ideas for next year. And I'm going to let Rob and Megan take it over and talk a little bit about our data and some of the learning behind it.
This is something that we show to our staff at the end of the year when we're done wrapping up our universal screenings too, and we've come in front of the board as well. But for our school-wide behavior data, this was a nice visual because it's our tiers of what we're seeing. The bottom part of that tier is what we saw last year with the remote learning of universally screening our 8th graders. And as you can see, Tier 3 was 14% of our students that took the survey were flagged in Tier 3, which is self-harm or suicidal ideation. This year, we finished all of our 8th graders already, and we jumped up to 18%. And so our Tier 2s went from 30% during online COVID, which you would say during isolation, online learning, and then it jumped up higher now that we're back. So looking at this data, as our team is looking at it, we're like, oh, those are huge percentages. That's why I'm exhausted here in my building. But the good thing that we were finding from it is our needs that were unknown actually went down, and that's one of the things that I've always always been so honored about working at Mapleview is our staff know our kids and our families. And so a lot of those red flags were suicidal ideations that were reported back during online remote learning. But the students reported that they didn't actually want to die. They just felt this immense overwhelm. I want this to end. And so we were able to kind of have different conversations about what's overwhelm versus true suicidal ideation. But almost all the students had already had discussions at home with their caregivers or with their teachers or with the counselors in the school. And so I think that that's a huge testament to not only our school, but Tahoma as a district. So yes, we're seeing these numbers spiking and increasing, but our community and our schools are doing stuff about it.
So the cool thing is, like Megan said, my name is Robert Talbert, I'm the assistant principal, and last year we started noticing things. When Megan's talking about things ending, we wanted to get kids back in front of us and really know what's going on with kids. So there's some things that some of the admin, the PBIS team did around some accountability for students, and we learned pretty quickly that kids hadn't been in school for a couple of years, and we had to think about some responsibility-centered discipline that they needed to own. And that's what this piece is right here, and just connecting with teachers. So we did this piece in August to really teach teachers what support looks like for a kid, what the expectation is for a kid, some of the things that might be breaking down, and some benefits, and then some closure. And if teachers are doing those things, then it's time to kind of involve the office staff. So it's just kind of resetting some things. We also are a big proponent of what we call this circle or restorative justice piece right here, or restorative circles, where we really want students to own their behaviors. And so some of these pictures you see are actual classrooms implementing that, where students are learning some structures and some strategies on how to manage themselves in a classroom, because remember, they haven't been in classrooms for a while. And it gives students a chance to kind of sit and be part of a school community and really think about kind of what does this classroom community look like? What's expected of me? How do I get engaged in this? And then these are some things that really, like, if we can hit those hard, they can get to the academics.
One thing that I really liked about circles when we're going into different classrooms and seeing them in circles is during that remote online learning, they leaned into social media so much, and they had the screen, and that's how we stayed connected. But a circle forces them to actually look at their fellow humans and learn those manners again of how to be in a group and look at people and have those conversations. And
part of the expectation is they put all those distractions aside and really engage in a topic that the school or the classroom community kind of puts in front of them. So
can I pause? Can you go back to the slide previously? Just because you have so much experience here, and when Megan talked about that Tier 3 change, can you give us some context, like when you've seen the impact on our staff and our support staff?
So we were just in another meeting, and we're talking about just the amount of time that Tier 3 and Tier 2 take up for admin, but also for teachers. And Tier 3 is kind of the end. It usually should be like 2 or 3% of the population that need these Tier 3 interventions. And these are serious interventions. And the amount of time, energy, and effort that is taking to really support a small group of students is immense, and it's taken a toll on our staff, it's taken a toll on our admin, because of the fact that we're also, during this time, we're also asked to sub in classrooms and some other things that get pulled, because we just talked about that in our last breakout session. But as we think about, my 17 years of doing this work, and Miss Buckley's here too, and she's a big part of this, and how we really kind of look at what's going on, what the student needs, and how we're going to meet those needs. And right now, we're learning the needs we need to meet. We can't meet them yet, but we're on our way to figuring out strategies. And that's the cool thing about our conversations. As many as we've had, the short conversations, because we're pulled in so many different directions. Like in August, we're going to have some some trauma-informed instruction for teachers, because teachers are really seeing those ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences that kids have, really heightened. And this year in particular, we've really noticed those, and we're getting ready to plan for those for next year. But we haven't completely understood all of them yet. We have a pretty good idea, but we're learning quickly, and we're going to implement even quicker next year as we go.
And a lot of those tier 3s, like we said, the school knows, the families know, the community knows that those are there. But there's also a small handful of those where those tier 3 behaviors are so big that it takes 9 people sometimes to come intervene with one kid, because those behaviors are so big in that tier 3. So we almost need tier 4 for some of them.
Any questions on the couple things we've kind of had so far? All right.
Tracking.
So the other thing that's really impacted, I think, our students and us is just this piece around social media and how to really use social media appropriately. And our students are getting a lot of feedback from us on that and from each other. And we got to do a better job next year helping students understand the impact of this social media. Way back when I went to school, middle school, if I had an issue with a student, I could leave it on Friday. And now it's like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It just keeps getting brought up. So there's some strategies that we can kind of put in place for that. What you're also seeing is some positive reward systems that we do here as well, and some things that students can get connected with in a positive way. And this is we've done Bears Bucks a little differently, and we've actually, through our ASB, we've attached a monetary piece to it where the kids can buy stuff at the store. Mm-hmm. So these are all Bears Bucks that spell out the MVMS. And then the kids can buy things that are donated from the community. They can do things so that kids are really starting to kind of buy into what we're trying to help them with. We do a big celebration with that. We have paras kind of involved in the check-in, check-out. We have...
With the Bears Bucks, one thing that I've noticed now that we've opened the store, I had Ms. Buckley run the numbers, and we're at about 6,300 Bears Bucks given out to students this year, which is the most that we've ever seen. And we've opened the store, and at lunches, kids are like, hey, can I come sweep for you? Can I go put chairs away? Can I pick up something so that I can earn something? I want to go. I'm saving up to buy this thing from the store. And they're so excited about it now. They want to earn those. We also have the ones where the kids maybe don't want to spend it, but they get the random drawing from the yellow copy too. So it's kind of modernizing and changing it to what student rewards are given different ways.
The kids are really excited about it, and some of the past systems that we had in place with sports and different things, they donate some of their old gear and different things so they can walk around with like a vintage Tahoma, jersey or something like that. It's really super cool.
And
you want to talk about the one on the right?
Yeah, the picture of the kids in the store too, that's our advanced leadership crew. And I went and asked them if we could get a picture of them in the store, and they were all so excited. They came running down and they're like, we all want to be a part of it. They're so proud to be able to run the store too. So we're seeing pride in the school that way.
We saw a kind of a demo call back in February when we came around and did our tour of schools, and there's a fantastic group of kids. It was so cool.
Yeah. They're proud of it and running the store. They're reframing the behavior for the past couple of years. At Mapleview, we've been doing our PSTs, our grade level student of concern meetings, and we've been training our staff on the Ross Green philosophy of kids do well if they can, as opposed to kids do well if they want to. We got a really good ball rolling with the momentum of it, and then COVID hit and closures, and how do you run student of concern meetings when you're concerned about every kid? And so this year we've been implementing that again. One of the things that I've enjoyed is our teachers come into those meetings with positive attitudes. They do believe in this mentality now. We've talked about upwards of like 25 students in an hour problem solving things and giving teachers tools to go back from those meetings too. And so we're seeing some change with that PST model, and kids do well if they can.
Megan, can you talk a little bit came to you and talked about this idea of having a SEL para.
Yeah.
Talk them through that process.
On the other side is two of our paras that are special ed paras right now, but they also do run our check-in, check-out model, so they're wearing many hats as well. But one thing that we're seeing is our sixth graders that came up to us are coming from middle schools that had SEL paras. And so some of those gen ed kids have access to those paras for different things like friendship groups or the check-in, check-out or the check-in connect. And the one intervention that we know always works in schools is when kids feel connected to staff. And so SEL paras would help relieve some of those smaller level groups that the counselors would maybe be able to do in the more intensive intervention groups. They'd be able to run the check-in, check-out process and do the data monitoring, do the progress monitoring and checking in with the kids. They'd be able to help with the push-in process and getting to know those kids. And so one thing is that we're getting kids from the elementary level that have used this support of SEL paras, and then they come to the middle school and we're huge and we're big and we have a different schedule, and I changed the way I'm grading things to not have that resource in the middle schools when they were used to it in the elementary schools just doesn't really make sense. And so that having SEL paras in the building would help with the SBIRT process. If we want to expand SBIRT into doing even more universal screenings than just in 8th grade, we could use the SEL paras to help with some of those green check-ins so we can do a bigger one, because one thing we always do with SBIRT is we check in with every kid who takes the survey. And so that would let the SBIRT wellness coordinator focus on more of the tier 2, tier 3, while somebody's still getting that check-in with the greens. So we could definitely put SEL paras to work.
Well, yeah, when both these talked about this and are really hopeful, but that 18% tier 3 is a big deal. We have to do something differently. So Megan helped me put together to apply for some of the COVID relief money so that we could offer these positions that have never existed before at the middle level. So we're excited about it.
Yeah.
I think they're going to fit well with what we do. We need it. We need more people to connect with more kids, because our kids are struggling for connections right now.
And I reached down to the counselors at the elementary level who have SEL paras and said, how do you use them? How's it working for you? And all 3 of the schools that feed into us are like, I don't know how to do my job without them now. That there are so many kids that utilize that para, and then they're coming up to you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're not going to have the resource that these kids have been leaning into.
It's a big deal for us to be able to kind of meet kids where they are and give them what they need. That's a big deal for us. And that's all within the framework of, you see a lot of this. This isn't just a sign on the wall with the arms locked, hearts full piece. That is something we kind of breathe and live and figure out ways because we don't have all the answers, but we definitely can put like that PST, that problem solving team, their heads together. We can put PBIS team, their team, and that team, our heads together and think about ways, because kids are doing things we haven't seen yet, and we got to respond in a different way, kind of moving forward. That's the only way we can kind of do it, and that's what we believe at Mapleview. I think we're at questions now.
Yep, you've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay, so.
Well, I'm excited about where we're at, and I hear that out of you too. And I'm wondering, what have we learned from this year coming out of COVID, where kids are at? We learned a lot. What are we, trauma-informed instruction, I heard maybe a couple other things. What are we planning to install next year? Where are we heading?
So we also noticed that kids weren't really talking well with each other. So we also brought in just a little shot in the arm with Esteban.
Oh yeah, I was there for that.
So Esteban came up, and he was talking about building that relationship.
Yeah.
That was incredible. So we want to do more things like that, where we can really meet kids where they are, but also figuring out strategies within our teams to figure out how we meet, to get ready for those August days and get teachers prepared better than ever to be able to respond to those ACEs with some trauma-informed instruction, with some strategies on how to meet them right where they are in the classroom right then and there. And we've already kind of paved the ground a little bit with having the restorative circles in place and restorative structures. So we're already we've been ahead of the ball game in that aspect because we've done that for many years. We just got to get better at it, and we got to carve out some time for instruction on the Friday early releases and within our 49 hours to really figure out what's happening and how we respond so we can continue to wrap our arms around these situations and learn together.
The other piece I'd share is a comprehensive counseling program. Our counselors, our administrators, we've been just reacting for about 2 years now, and we've got a young counseling staff that's excited, talented, and is doing thinking right now about putting together a comprehensive, proactive plan for next year, including social media messaging. We're not just talking about assemblies, but how do we weave this into the stretch curriculum so it's part of what we do? Anti-bullying, anti-slur, continuing our equity work, all those are items that our counseling team is excited about. We're having those conversations right now.
Last week in our counseling department meeting, we talked about district-wide a counselor burnout and how our team seems pretty cohesive and is doing well. And after you left, we stayed a little bit longer, but they talked about how we're grade level counselors now. And so it's allowed our counselors to really hone in on these are 7th grade things that we need to address. These are the 7th grade teachers that I need to partner with this year, as opposed to saying, I need to go partner with the whole school and all of the teachers and all of the students that are just in my alpha. But when they can hone in on just one grade level and one cohort of what's working with that, then they can move forward. And so they did feel like being grade level counselors is giving them a little bit of breath while they're working through that too.
And that sounds pretty simple in its essence, but the fact of the matter is the counselors won't have to start relationships all over again except for one grade level, and that is the incoming 6th graders.
Right.
So once that counselor gets that group up and going and builds those relationships with the kids, the teachers, the parents, then they're up and running for 3 years.
Right.
And that's huge that, we're not sitting here figuring out, okay, Megan, she's A through, this kid is in crisis, and we know exactly what grade level they are, and we can get them the help they need right when they need it. So it's exciting for us to think about where we are.
Yeah, the other thing too I'm excited about is the Peak Math program, which I know we talked about in the other room, but the fact that Sean in that program is going to be learning so many community building strategies that then they'll be able to share with the staff to maybe implement in other content areas too, is going to be huge for our students.
So I'm going to throw it out there. We may have 30 seconds, but I'm going to throw it out there. Expert question, and we're, call it 3 or 4 years into that program now, and I'm wondering, it feels like we're maybe on to generation 2 of our learning and implementation of all of that program, and what have we learned? What's kind of new and coming, and we're still in 8th graders, is that right?
We're still in 8th graders.
Yeah.
Next year, our plan is to universally screen all of the 8th graders, and then at 2 points within the year, look at our homeroom risk index list and pull the high flyers that are coming out of that in 6th and 7th grade, and then do a screening with those kids so we can get early intervention put in place for those kids that are identified in the risk index list.
And that'll be different.
And that's different, that's new. The other thing that's exciting is at the high school next year, they're planning on universally screening the 10th grade, which is a grade that we've already universally screened because they were 8th graders a couple years ago. Yep. And so we'll be able to start having conversations about how did SBIRT work with them, what preventative measures were put into place. One of my favorite things is screening kids earlier in the year, and maybe they come back and they're fine, but having those preventative conversations, and then they march up to me in the hallway or the lunchroom and say, something came up and I need to talk to you. Okay, let's go. So the conversations that we're having are making an impact with those kids. Yeah. One thing in the motivational interviewing training they always say is when a kid says, so I thought about what you said and now I'm thinking, then we know we're doing our job right with SBIRT. Right. And so hearing that from kids has always been really impactful. One thing real quick that I like to do is we do positive postcards that we send out. We have all of our positive postcards out for Mapleview now at this point in the year. And so that's been really impactful too. I had one kid come up and go, I got your letter in the mail and now I'm on the football team and you're coming to every single one of my football games, even the away games, right? And you're like, oh, that's a big commitment. I just sent you a postcard. But our postcards make a huge impact too.
Appreciate
Thank you,
that.
team. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Sitting here talking.
If you're ready and
You're
would
ready,
like to
I'll
start, you are more than welcome to.
Yeah, are you all ready?
Yeah.
Fine.
Okay. How many, is this 2 now, going on your 3rd?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So, one of the things that we heard in talking to Ms. Wakely, preparing for this round of presentations, was, and I'm summarizing, but, have some good slides, but make it somewhat conversational. Okay, so we're hoping to have a conversation with you today about high expectations. And when I look at this first slide, this is one we used earlier in the year, and I like it for a lot of different reasons. Happy kids, obviously we're graduating, like future ready, here we go. And if it were just this slide we were having a conversation about, you might think high expectations is specifically all about graduation and where they're going next. And I would say yes, and obviously it's also about the high expectations we have for our students and for our staff, the teaching and learning that's taking place every day in our classrooms. But it's more, right? And so one of the things that I was thinking about is the language specifically connected to the board goal. I like to, I didn't bring my nice cardstock one.
Is that slide on purpose?
Well, here's the thing about this slide, sir. You asked your first question. If you mean that darling, blonde-haired, stringy boy on the end, yes, I put my son on there on purpose.
I'm wondering about the 2 other kids on there.
I grabbed the children.
That's surprising because one of them doesn't even have my last name either. So
I'm good.
That's good. That was a good job on your own.
Seriously, here's what it is. We have a shared vested interest in high expectations in the school district. We're both fathers here. And there's other school board members that have their children here, both at the high school. You've got one at the elementary, I believe, as do I. In fact, I've got Shadow Lake, Maple View Middle, the high school, and little Bodie James, 8-month-old, he's coming through all of them, right? But in all seriousness, these words are important. When we just say, high expectations, teaching and learning, I think what we're really trying to do gets lost. And I love how it opens. We believe that collective, right? That's important because that we is us. It's you and I, it's my colleagues in the back. It's the teachers we work with. It's our kids, right? We believe that every student can learn and achieve at high levels, growing academically, socially, and emotionally every year. Those words are super important. We just left a belonging presentation where we spent 20 minutes talking about just the care and the time and the effort that went into making sure that our kids were socially and emotionally growing, right? I'll tell you the story of a stringy blonde-haired boy briefly, and then I want to ask you some questions and let you talk to us. But my son grew this year, right? And I can't speak to every family's experience in our system, but I'll speak for a moment of my family's. And we came out of a pandemic, like all of us. The boy was nervous to go to school, right? And I knew he was going to be okay, but there was a lot of angst, there was a lot of concern, there was a lot of hesitation from me, right? He had his own worries, but I'm proud to say that, he found an art teacher that believed in him and pushed him. And, I want to say around October, he came home and started talking about, how much a graphic designer makes, Dad? It's like, no, tell me more. I think those are more words that he said to me all September. And I realized it wasn't just his art teacher pushing him and talking about his ability in art and his skills, but it was one of his CTE teachers in an elective he took, career explorations, that got him thinking about, gosh, what do I have to do to maybe go to college to do this? He was getting pushed, right? He connected through a team that he joined, and I know his emotional security was growing and being taken care of by some really caring adults in our building. So that's my kid's story that I put up here, and anticipating that I was going to run into someone that had a child here, I threw some others on there. I'm just curious, like, what's your story? what's your kids' experience connected to high expectations around growing academically, socially, emotionally? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, both kids are very different in behaviors. I mean, you'd be surprised they're brothers, but you know, and I guess I've been seeing more the three levels of academic, social, and emotionally with more of my high schooler than the second grader. Right?
Sure.
I mean, and just the social and emotional piece is huge for me, because I don't think these kids can really perform academically if they don't have those other two pieces. And those that's why high expectations in all three areas is strong for me, because it's been a struggle, the socially and emotionally part. It's been a rough year, I would say, for high schooler and for personal reasons as well. But yeah, I mean, but I don't think if you look at those right, they're not going to do well on the first piece. And that's just my take.
Well, I tell you, that's a take we're hearing over and over again from a lot of families, you know. And as an administrative team, it was one of the reasons we took a long, hard look at culture and climate and belonging to focus on this year, knowing that we had to get a really good gauge of where our kids are at on that social emotional side before we could really start pushing with high expectations on the academic side. And we're not done, right? There's more work to be done. But I don't know. I feel like we're confident that based on the year we had, you know, utilizing our expert data, you know, for the surveys they did, you know, utilizing our teachers' input based on what they were seeing day to day in the classroom, that as we continue to work on our social and emotional growth for our students, we're going to start making a bigger push towards that strong academic, you know, not just high expectations, but high support. And so that's a little bit of what we want to talk to you about. And jump in anytime with questions, like, you know, if you got questions about something or suggestions, conversational based. But again, going back to the language of high expectations, there's some targets that go along with those board goals. And I didn't, you know, put the language to all the targets, but we really tried to focus on growth for all students in these areas, specifically social and emotional, to start this year so we could get that good base. Like you said, until they feel safe, until they feel connected, it's going to be real hard to get them to push themselves in their lit, in their algebra, in their science. We want to take a good hard look at recovery learning and instructional leadership, because our theory of action is, you know, if we could really have high support for our teachers, specifically our teacher leaders that lead their content groups and their department groups, those folks that have boots on the ground every day with our kids. If we could support those teacher leaders, and if we could also identify specifically what are some structures we can put in place to close gaps for kids, both whole school and then some specific targeted groups. We felt we were going to put ourselves in position to make some really good gains, not like in year one, but these are 5-year board goals, you know, and so we had to keep that in mind as we were setting up structures for our long-term work. In the short term, you know, our goal target specifically, you know, I would say back in November, we were at 43% school-wide DNF rate. We set the goal that, hey, we want to get it down to 20. Okay, at the end of first semester, we had it down to 42%. So we made, 32%. We made significant progress towards it, but not there yet. We got a couple weeks left in the semester, and we're still working towards getting to that 20% at this point. Another area that we wanted to see some gains, or when I say growth, we wanted to see some gaps closed, specifically was in our freshman class. There's research that shows that freshman on-track graduation rate, basically passing all your classes, is a major indicator for graduating on time. And so, you know, as we thought about as a team, how are we going to do this? Again, we'll go back to instructional leadership being one of our strategies. Really wanted to focus in on not just like, okay, district level and building level administrators coming up with plans and let's go to work and then tell the teachers what to do, but training up our teacher leaders so they could go into their rooms with their teams and talk about, okay, where are our kids at? Where do we want to get them and how are we going to get them there? That's been huge for us. That work's ongoing, and it's something that we're going to continue to carry on over the next 4 years, so we can get growth for all kids in that area of you know, social, emotional, and academics. I guess the one thing I'll speak to in regards to our teacher leader teams, each department has at least one teacher leader. Okay, I don't know how familiar you are with this structure. A little bit.
Yeah.
So it's an incredible resource for us to have and to use to support our kids. So our foreign language department may be smaller than, say, history or English, so they'll have one teacher leader, right? Whereas in our English department, which is massive, they're English, math, science, so they're some of our biggest in history, our biggest departments. We have teacher leaders for each of the content areas. So, grade 9 English, grade 10, and as you roll through, so these teachers can come together on the weekend, on the Fridays, early release time, and really dig into student data, the goals that they're setting for their kids, and again, how they're going to accomplish them. Thing that I appreciate this year in working with our instructional coaches and our friends over at Teaching and Learning, we put time on the table, and we paid teachers additional time to come in and do some problem solving with us, because leading teacher groups, that's hard, and it's a really high expectation connected to leadership, and with that we needed to have some high support for them. So we met 3 times as a team and provided opportunities for the teachers to get training on group facilitation. We met once in small groups and checked in with our director of teaching and learning and her associates, so we could hear from small groups of teacher leaders of what's working, what do their teams need, what additional things can we be doing for those groups to support closing gaps for kids. And so we felt really good about that process and those structures, and we'll be continuing those into next year.
Did you feel like you had enough time, for the teachers to break away with all the subproblems?
There's never enough time.
There's not enough time,
right?
But
if you ask a teacher what do they need, we need more time.
Yeah.
We need more time. We had more structured time this year than we have in the past, and we're trying to be really strategic and smart with our time. So even if we can't get massive amounts more with what we have, it's really effective and efficient, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Because again, it's the resource that we can't create really more of based on our contract, and just there's only so many hours in the day.
Right.
So to best utilize that time, we have the Teacher Leader Institutes, which we had 3 times this year, where we met with those teacher leaders and we worked with them on those facilitation experiences. And part of that was giving them some of the language that they may need in order to have those conversations. And so these are the PLC questions. It's PLC Plus, and it's Fisher and Frey. There's another model as well, but this is, I've actually worked with both models. I really like this one because I think that it gives us the right language for those discussions about where are kids right now. We can't make decisions about what they need until we know where they are. And then we can think about where are they going? How are we going to get them there? So how do we move that learning forward? What did we learn today? And that can be as adults, what did we learn? But it can also be with our kids each day. But this last question is the one where we're seeing the need. Mm-hmm. Who did and did not benefit from these things? And that can happen at the end of lessons. It can happen at the end of units. I know with our survey data, we're asking that question right now, like who did and did not benefit. And I think this gives our teachers a lot of good language for the types of conversations that they want to have.
So what do you think is going to be the answer?
To question 5.
Yeah.
Depends on which group you're looking at. Specifically with the survey data, I think we're finding that there might be students who didn't feel as if they were seen. And so then our job is to do our best to see them. I think when you're looking at, English language arts, you might notice that some of your English language learners aren't benefiting from the same lessons that your native speakers are. So I think it's just kind of which group you're looking at or which specific element.
A lot of factors connected to the content, how long the team's been together, and what gap they're trying to close for sure. So we talked about targeting some specific groups, and one of them being our freshmen. And you're going to hear a little bit more about a couple of these structures that Marty and I worked on together around supporting some of our underserved and at-risk kids. But the one thing that I will point out connected to the College Bound Freshman Fall Barbecue that we put together is it felt really good for a lot of different reasons. I'm not sure if you're aware of what the College Bound Scholarship is.
No,
Yeah.
first I heard.
Yeah, so basically, any of our students that are enrolled in our free and reduced lunch program, starting 2 years ago, they were auto-enrolled through the state into the College Bound Scholarship Program. And this is a program that basically says, as long as you graduate high school with a 2.0 or better, as long as you don't cause any major mischief, don't get a felony, right? Graduate on time and fill out a FAFSA. If you do those things, you're eligible for $10,000 a year for 4 years after you graduate high school for an in-state institution, whether it be a 4-year college, 2-year trade school. And when we looked at specifically our high expectation indicators around growth and college and career readiness, we realized it was a huge underused resource. And so we started targeting those kids and those families just to get them more information. And one of the first things we tried was like, let's feed people. You want to get someone in the door, give them a hamburger, right? And so we were able to get some of our staff members to come, help put on this barbecue, give tours, and just really welcome in these families while giving them information, right? While trying to help plant a seed about, hey, in 4 years, here's where you could be and where you could go. Another structure that we're feeling really excited about that we've had for the past 4 years now is our freshman and sophomore connections classes. And again, these started, we were targeting some of our most at-risk kids that were failing classes and basically not on track to graduate. And we knew that if they had, a connection to a caring staff member, a little more individual attention, and time focused around social emotional learning, right, and self-regulation and goal setting. Like if we could provide these things for them, they'd have a better chance of being successful in their classes. Coming out of COVID, we knew we were going to have a greater need. So prior to going into the pandemic, we had one freshman class. Then we added a sophomore class, and so we had the 2 sections. And again, because these are some of our most at-risk kids in regards to failing classes, not making good decisions. We banked on the fact that we were going to have a greater need for it, and so we had 3 of our 10th grade classes coming into this year. And we felt so fortunate that we got some data at the end of first semester that Mrs. Belleville was like, hey, check this out. Looking at it, and I didn't register at first until we looked at this number right here, 0.93. And basically what we're looking at is the average increase of the GPA of these students. It's significant. Like when you actually put what they had in the past 2 years next to what they currently have, we had kids moving from, just barely making the 2.0 to almost a 3.0. We had a kid that had a 1.2. That's a huge celebration considering they made a full game. They had a 0.2 the year. I mean, so, yeah, are they passing all their classes? No, but when you look at that in terms of growth, when I come from a 0.02 and I move up to that 1.2, that's a big deal. It felt really good to celebrate that with our staff. And Mrs. Belleville had a really good idea. It's like, hey, since we're focusing on recovery learning, we should probably try to access some of that recovery learning grant money and see if we can put in an application, because we need more of this right now, right? And so I'm not sure if you've had any conversations about the recovery learning grant through the state that's available.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not going to be here forever. Right. It's a sum of money that was offered to our school district that we were able to put a proposal in for. And we said, hey, our theory is if we can get enough funds for 5 more sections of this next year, plus a teacher, 6 more sections, plus a teacher leader stipend to go with this to support our small alternative learning team. We think that we can make these type of gains for that many more kids. Mm-hmm. It was approved. Really excited about that. Again, we're talking about social, emotional, and academic growth for some of our most at-risk kids. I don't have the freshman numbers up here, but we had 12 of 14 students make significant academic growth and attendance growth in first semester from where they were in 8th grade to 9th grade. just listening to some of the stories from our teachers about, when they share with the kids, look how far you've come, right? It's a major success that we're looking forward to utilizing to, again, close some of those freshman failure rate gaps and support the overall DNF rate of the building in general by supporting this targeted population.
Chris, we have just 3 minutes left.
Okay. So I'm just going to sum it up with, last thing I want to point out is we started a peer tutoring program to support all students based out of the Future Center Library. And it started off slow and it's gaining momentum, and basically what we have are a group of students that are looking for opportunities to serve their community and their classmates. And so they meet up in the Future Center Library during power hour, during lunch, and they meet with kids and tutor their classmates, math, English, science. As we moved into second semester and started brainstorming with our team, how can we get tutors to kids that need it? Because they were getting customers, right? They were getting drop-ins, but not a lot. And that's when we started collaborating with other teachers and like, hey, who has a need for the support? And pretty soon we found out there was lots of our ELL students eating lunch every day in their ELL teacher's room. And wouldn't you know it, we have 3 tutors that speak Spanish, they speak Japanese, right? One of them speaks French, and they're now going to these classrooms to meet the kids there and helping them grow, right? We have multiple examples of that. And just to share one story quickly, this is one of our science teachers, Miss Nance, phenomenal teacher, sent an email to our team saying, I just have to share this story. Basically, one of our at-risk learners was asking for an extension on a lab. Teacher said, hey, I told you a week ago, but I'll give you an extension, it's gonna be late. Miss Nance doesn't realize it, but the kid's table mate sitting there pipes up and like, hey, why don't you come to the Future Ready Library during lunch? I'll help you with this. I tutor kids on this, and we'll get it done. They came back after lunch, the lab was done, it was on time, the kid got full credit, it was win-win. Yeah. We had a kid that got help from a peer and was able to make gains. We had a kid that's trying to give back to his community, got to mentor someone and get recognized for it by his teacher. And so really excited about the structure we're putting in place. Don't know how far it's gonna go yet, but we've got some really positive, smart people working on this. I'm excited to come back next year and tell you where we're at with it.
Yeah, let's see.
That's all I got for you.
That's good. That's easy.
Right on time, like literally at the 7:15 mark.
Got a little bit of a savant thing.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Don't have any time for questions, but
no, that was great.
You know where I work.
Yeah, that's good work.
Nope.
Okay.
Check in with
Yep. This is the Carrie and Tony show. We have equity, and I know that we just kind of presented on this like a month ago. So it might be a little similar, but it's always fun to talk about. I'm gonna start off with just the student voice stuff. So if you click this slide. These are the students who make up the core part of the Student Voice Committee, and I would say 90% of them have been with me for 2 years for the district committee. The 3 people in the middle are kind of my big leaders there, and 2 of them are graduating, but we're really excited about the future. But they've done a lot of work, and it's kind of my favorite part about my last 2 years here. And like if you click this, let me go to the next one. I'm just going to talk about this year, and you know about the Culture Fair, but Tony and I teamed up to do our groups, I guess, teamed up to do the first annual Culture Fair in Human Library. And so like my students from the Student Voice Committee paired up with the Asian Student Union to put on cultural booths, and they reached out to like Renton High School to do a performance, and then we had like a couple students from the middle school to come and do some performances and run a culture booth. Altogether we had about 20 booths, and they had like prepackaged like ethnic food that displayed their culture, and the pictures you can kind of see it's the coolest thing I think, and just how they interacted with anyone who came to their booth. And I gotta say, we had so many people there, like way more than we anticipated. then the human library was really cool. We had about 15 adults and one student who were basically like, we wanted them to people could check out their them. So like if I was a human book, someone could check me out and we would get to hear my story. And the idea, as you know, it was just to learn and hear people's stories, and people from all different walks of life. My parents came to this and they loved it. I think they went through 5 people, but we had like LGBTQ, we had trans, we had a trans man who's actually a Tahoma grad here from like back in the 80s. And we had Ethiopian refugee, I believe, come over here, and his story was amazing. That's him right here, I believe. And a couple, just like really interesting people. And we had food trucks and stuff like that, and I don't know how many people we had, but it was a lot. It was really neat to see 2 things. It was really neat to see a lot of the parents came of the students who were doing the culture booth, and it was neat for them. I thought it was neat to see them kind of have a little community there too. But then we saw like a ton of staff, like from all different schools in our district. So like actually people here, Lori and Mike were there, and I think 4 other principals. And this is just on a Tuesday night, and I thought it really showed how important it was for this district. And so our in future thinking is like, hopefully this can be a district-wide event. We already got someone from Shadow Lake who was wanting to do something similar at the elementary level, and asking, the high school kids to help them with that. So I think this I think we started something pretty cool. And I forgot to say, Tony's group was our high school like site plan equity team, who they came up with the human library. Allison Agnew was the one she's phenomenal with this, and just that this was a lot of her and Tony's team on the human library side. But just a really, really neat thing. Tony and I just kind of sat back.
I think the piece that I didn't expect that I saw, you see things and you feel things. And one of the things that I felt was the adults in our community coming together and looking around and saying, we're not alone out here. And I can tell you from personal experience, there's times when you feel like there's not a lot of folks that look like me. And so to have that collection of folks come together and be celebrated like they were that evening was pretty special. The kid stuff that Carrie referred to was magic. But to have adults also be able to be a part of and feel the benefits of being a part of something like that. And we just have to continue to find ways to recapture it and make it better each year as we go on. We've set ourselves up to have to do it from this point on. That's a good thing.
I think too, it stemmed from the student group wanting to make others feel welcome. And how do we do that? And then it was one of my students, Aaliyah, who's like, we should do a culture fair. And it just kind of exploded on that. So it's pretty cool.
I have to piggyback on that, Mr. Davis, because I truly felt like that too. I was so sad that I missed this. It was a night where I was tied up with something with the kids, but my kids get the back seat next year to this, so I will be there. But I have to say that from everything that I've heard and just how you guys have described this, I just feel like this is like the belonging piece for our community. We talk about belonging for all of our schools and our kids and their families, but this culture fair and the human library, it just felt like the belonging piece for our community and our community outreach, and I just so appreciate it, and I've just heard so many wonderful things about it, and such a success.
Well, and with at the high school, it's like 33% students of color. So there's a lot more than just 20 different cultures at our school. And I think a lot of the way to break down barriers is just to get to know people. Like, I don't know if people have talked to a gay person before, but they can talk to me. You know what I mean? And so, and then maybe that could break down a barrier for them, and then maybe they're not scared. right? And then you can accept people once you know someone's story. So I think stories are huge. Rolling right in. So this is more of my student voice. So they wanted to do awareness months for each month, because it started with Black History Month, and then it's gone every month since then. And the idea was just to kind of educate and tell history. They've got actually a little format. I mean, the kids are really awesome. They've taken this and just run with it. And we haven't really done big events around it just because we were really focusing on the culture fair. But the Pride one is the LGBTQ plus. That is that's tomorrow. And so what was really neat, what we're doing is we're teaming up with the Art Club and the Saga Club, which is, it's it's kind of like it's the LGBTQ club. I can't remember. It's like sexuality and gender. Anyways, dang it, I will get that. I have it on my phone. But anyways, so we just started making buttons, and the idea is our digital arts teacher designed a bunch of them, and then my kids came in and we started like cutting out circles and making buttons. And the idea is starting tomorrow, staff can have they have like 5 different designs that they can choose from. And I actually brought you one, but you'll have to leave one. So
thank you. I will wear it.
So wait, is this?
Oh, cute.
Oh, yeah.
I can see it.
So that's she, her.
Oh, love it.
And then this is like THS with a rainbow.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then we have an ally. So THS with the ally.
Oh, I like that.
And then there's he, him, they, them, and then just the pride flag.
Oh, I love that. I would love that.
Which one?
Can I have the ally?
Yes. So then the idea, though, is to show students that, hey, I'm an ally, or I'm safe, or I understand that pronouns are important, and to kind of normalize it. Hey, we're using pronouns and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
And so
those are available for the kids. Just like where can they?
So not yet. So first we have staff. So staff start tomorrow because it's a smaller number because we have to make those buttons. So on the 6th, we are going to do a video announcement or a video segment on LGBTQ Month, and then that Monday during Power Hour we'll have opportunities for students to have pens, and we are teaming up with a couple other clubs to do some activities that week. So anyways, we're really excited about that because that's such an easy way to show support.
Let's just pause for a second. We've been doing all the time. Carrie's been doing all the time with our group that we have here. Just questions, feedback, and Mike and Laura, I think you guys had a chance to be at the fair and the Human Library. Thoughts on how to make it better or make sure that it's lasting? I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys on that.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. I can't see who's in the room. Do you have other folks you're asking for questions?
I was asking Lori, and I'll include you, Ed. I was asking Lori and Mike just their thoughts and feedback on the event that we were just talking about, how to make sure that it sustains, questions they have about it. I don't think we've ever given you guys that opportunity to share.
I would say the one thing that my takeaway was, you're right, I think it was overwhelming with how many people were there. I would say spreading it out more to be able to get through, because it was a little claustrophobic.
Don't do it on a band concert night.
but that wasn't expected to know there was going to be that kind of a turnout. And I don't disagree that I don't think there's not a way that it won't continue.
And I think the part that you shared that gets overlooked a lot is the adult impact, and it reminds me of the grand kickoff that we did for the cricket team starting out in Maple Valley, and you could see the pride in that cricket community of coming together in that way, which was great. I think when I think about the culture fair, one of the pieces of feedback I've heard is middle school interest, and I've heard you guys talk about the district-wide event, so it makes me wonder how we move forward with that. Is it one big event? Is it multiple? What are we going to do there? I think there's logistical stuff, but that's pretty obvious because we had a lot more people show up than we thought were going to be there. One of the pieces, I go back to a couple years ago, Tony, us sitting, having conversations that you're really good about asking, which is, how are we going to know if we're successful? And that's what I'm listening for right now. One of Haley's jobs, of many that she has and the board have, is to monitor progress of our system and how are we doing. I think that'll be a piece where I'll be curious to hear from you guys' thoughts on that and what the look fors are, because these are hard things to measure.
Yeah, you just stole my second question. How do we measure that? Because I struggle with it. A lot of these things that are tied to equity and belonging, they're feelings. And I suppose you can survey and measure for feelings, but it doesn't feel quite as concrete as maybe the math teacher in me would like it to be. But we need to know that we're moving in the right direction. And we have to come up with ways to be able to measure that as we're working through these things. Haley or James, anything?
Yeah, the measuring of success, I was interested in that as well. And also, a little bit more of like a detailed question, just I know, for instance, from Lake Wilderness with their PTA, I know they're very interested in trying to kind of, piggyback onto the whole cultural fair. It's probably similar to Shadow Lake. So seeing that we have two, and I'm sure you've had other interests from other schools too, how do you foresee that kind of evolving, and could it evolve as quick as next year to get those other schools kind of involved and just kind of trying to, strike when the iron's hot with them and their interest in that? Is that feasible?
Sure. Finding the time to get everybody in the room to have that conversation.
Yeah.
If we were going to make a decision tonight, I would probably lean toward doing in buildings, because I think part of the hook is getting our community to come into our buildings so that they feel like this is my school, this is my kid's school. So if we were doing it all at one site, high school, for example, we lose that experience for the Shadow Lake family, for the Cedar River family. I won't go through and list all the schools. So is that a trade-off by having smaller events at those different satellite locations? Or, we got to weigh the benefits of that large event to that opportunity to get connected to your community school. And I think that's an important piece of the work that's ahead in this area as we move forward, because it starts with your school. And then it actually starts with the teacher that you have, and then the school that teacher is in, and how they build those connections with the students in their classroom, and then the families on top of that. So we've got some planning to do.
I would just piggy off that. I think it meant the world to have the students get up there in front of the 250 people and say, this is why it's important to us. So, and I think that does break down some of the stigma and barriers and trauma maybe that they felt at our school. And I think if everybody could do that at their own school, if you had elementary kids saying, this is important to us. And I know that's a big ask, but they could be I think that hearing, kind of owning their own school is a big deal. I do know that people say, if we would have known about this earlier, so, and it was kind of just Tony and I doing stuff. So I think now if we put the date out or the week out or something like that.
I have to laugh because we had no idea how many people were going to show up.
Yeah.
You're crossing your fingers.
We just wanted
want
some
one
people.
for everyone in the human
I
library.
was like, my parents are coming.
Yeah, we're calling favors to family and friends and everyone else. But it was amazing. It was a special night. I'm going to keep rolling because the clock's ticking on us here. This slide just is a reminder. There's a lot of folks out there who will talk about what we aren't and what equity and what our district shouldn't be. And I prefer to focus on what we are. and the things that we want to be able to do and accomplish and eventually measure. And teaching empathy and understanding. These were the things that were rooted in the conversations that went into designing the event that we were just talking about. Teaching students to show respect for others, including those who are different from them. And as Carrie mentioned, our diversity has grown over the last, I think the first year on that chart that you sent me was maybe 15 years ago. And I can't remember what the percentage of non-white students and families was, but now we're up to right around 35%. And that understanding who's sitting in the chair next to me and what does that look like for a second grader, to help them understand what that is, and that you can go play and it's okay to play with everybody that's in your class. What does that look like for a senior who's getting ready to go out to the real world and the reality that, well, if you say these things at your job, that's going to get you fired. So the level of impact is different, and we'll work our way through some of those things. Teaching students to show kindness to others, they all kind of just mesh together. There's 4 words. I beat them to death, but welcoming, safe, supportive, and inclusive. And that's the filter for how we decide whether this is something that we need to be doing, something that we get behind and support, and the conversations will just keep going. And just keep putting our kids and adults in our buildings in position to feel like I belong here. Real simple phrase, but getting to that place where you can not just say it, but feel it. That's pretty important in the work that we're doing. Boom. The core of all this has been the trainings with Dr. Hollins. So we've done 3 in the last, or 3 each year for the last 2 years, so a total of 6. The 2021-22 training topics are listed at the bottom of this. Haley, I don't know if you can see that or not, but at the beginning of the year, we talked about workplace barriers. We had a presentation on privilege. And then the last one that we did, and I believe all buildings get the same 3 presentations in the same order, if I'm not mistaken. So microaggressions was the last one that we had. And so we got to build this information base. And once we have people that have a certain degree of skills, then we can start doing things with those skills that we've given them. But we've got to build this informational foundation to get started. And that's what Dr. Hollins has done a fantastic job of. And it's not comfortable for everybody to sit in the room, but that's where growth comes from as well, is being uncomfortable and understanding and digging inside to find out, why am I uncomfortable with this conversation? That's where the growth comes from, and that's what Dr. Hollins has really kind of set the table for us with these things. So I guess we're getting close. About flip it one more time and we'll bring this thing home. Book club.
So real quick, book clubs that's basically like little equity circles that have been going on. It's probably over like 60 or 70 staff in the last couple of years. We're doing Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. It's a LGBTQ book. A lot of interest in those books right now in our staff. And real quick, I put the questions on here, but I realize you probably can't see them. So the last PD that we did was May 6th on equity, and it was from the Student Voices video that we did. And I had 3 of the members come, and they kind of led it. And they sat down with teachers and had discussions. And we really focused on just action steps. And so the questions were like, what can you do in your classroom? For like unconscious bias, what are some, like, what can you do to establish a classroom environment that is free of implicit and biased microaggressions? So it's like they loved it because they got to talk to each other, and it was in their content team, and they got to come away with some action steps, some real tangible things, because they've been dealing with all this hard stuff with Dr. Hollins, but now they're ready. A lot of them felt like they're ready, and they said like, they like the idea of just talking. You bring it back to the classroom because it's all about the kids, and that's it. That's good.
Area that we're headed toward. We have a fairly small group of high school teachers that have gone through some restorative justice training, just scratching the surface of it, the district-wide. That's why we threw that slide in there, just kind of as a kind of looking ahead type slide. So we're going to pause, maybe stop there because we're well over at this point. See if anybody else has any other questions. And
Haley?
Just real quick, and I don't know if you've gotten this far, but what do you see as the next step after you've completed these courses with Dr. Hollins? Do you see that this continues, or does a new speaker come, or how do you see that evolving?
We put our heads together, Mike and I, for a fairly short period of time, and we haven't made a decision yet. The thing that I think we agree on is that to do a presentation, large group, in September, August, and not do another one until 4 or 5 months after that, with nothing in between, it's not the way we're trained in the art of learning. And so we've got to figure out some ways to make it something that people look forward to, has got continuity to it. We also have a requirement to work SEL into the trainings for the 22-23 school year. But I think SEL and equity can live together as we work through this and put our plans together. And like Carrie was talking about, it's application. Give me something that I can go use. If I'm doing this training on Friday, give me something I can go use on Monday. So we're working on it.
Haley, we got to get back to the big group.
Okay.
Tony, Carrie, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Carrie, quiet.
I think one of the pieces that we definitely want to talk about is obviously a quick reflection of what we saw in our groups, etc. But I think a deeper, higher level question of what did we learn this year about what we're doing with our site plans and their presentations, and what are the board needs moving forward, and how do things like tonight influence any change that we have moving forward. I think that's an important part. And I'm happy to kick off our discussion based on what we saw. I know Haley and I were in the same room, and so we were in the belonging room. And so we had 3 belonging presentations and then the high school equity presentation. So that's what we saw. I would say, Haley, at a high level, there were various approaches towards trying to improve that sense of belonging in the buildings, which can go lots of directions. One of them shows that there's a level of ownership in the building as opposed to something coming out of the district office that's consistent or whatever. And we do know
it was on.
We do know that all 3 secondary buildings are quite different as well, so we would expect some variation in terms of their approaches to it. We definitely heard different thoughts and reflections on the method that we're using to measure belonging, which is how safe do I feel to share my thoughts and feelings in class as one of the primary methods. We also saw or heard folks excited about continuing that work in the service of growth. And so that's my high level takeaway. What would you add there, Haley?
Yeah, I mean, I hate just to copy you, but you pretty much hit it on the head. I think the beauty in this format is really seeing the way that each of these schools come at the goal of, belonging. I think that there's such value in seeing it, everything from, some skills are, their presentation focused on how they drilled into data. Some schools looked at how just the framing of certain questions given to kids at certain times during the day, and the word choice that were used in the survey, they kind of were looking at that piece. Other schools were, doing a lot of celebration, which is beautiful. So for me, what really stands out from a high level is just really looking and being, I'm just truly fascinated at seeing how they all come at this work in such a different way, all very valuable, but all in a different way, really.
Did Matt or Pete, did you guys have questions about the belonging stuff at all?
Any differences between the two middle schools that were surprising?
I don't know that they were surprising, but there were differences. And
Or they were just like shockers, like, oh,
yeah, no, I think some of it, like Mapleview has engaged early with the Tahoma Schools Foundation and got that grant for the Involve work, whereas Summit Trail has not. Some of the commonalities, both have web, where everyone belong, groups. The Mapleview definitely focused on disproportionality in the data and found leverage there, sounds like. So definitely different approaches, some commonality, but different approaches. So where Mapleview feels like they started to see movement is when they began being better coordinated about the work that they were doing on a consistent basis. Real similar to like what Tony talked about in our last presentation, which was spotty PD 4 months apart is not the best way to learn, and that you need some level of consistency. And so that was one of the pieces we heard from them.
No questions really about the belonging piece, no. I was, we were in that room, Haley and I were back in December, so it was good to hear just kind of a bit of an update, I suppose. So I was in the call it wellness room. I don't know what officially it was. Student supports, thank you. Just, at 30,000 feet, some differences in what was talked about. The high school team focused on SBIRT and the introduction of that tool set into that building this year and what they've learned. And Mapleview talked about just in general, call it student behavior, mental health, and how we support them at a real broad level. And then Summit Trail talked about UDL and what we're doing with UDL. And so just at 30,000 feet, it was interesting. Just belonging. You heard about belonging. It was pretty up and down. It seems like here's our targets, here's what we're aiming for, and here's our results, and so forth. And it was just some variation on even topically what was brought up in the room I was in, which isn't bad. It was just an observation. One theme that came through was that we are trying a lot of new things. We're having some success, but we're not really kind of resting on our laurels. We're asking really tough questions, and we're leaning in and digging into those questions. I like that. Just that with SBIRT, it's giving us obviously some insights into what's going on with students and how we can help them. And we're digging in deeper. How can we, beyond the SBIRT, what are the other triggers that we can see that are indicators of issues, and how can we meet those kids where they're at? That was really pretty powerful. Gwendolyn did a great job speaking to that. At Mapleview, it was more about, they have a pretty significant tier 2, tier 3 population there that needs a lot of help. And so they were, exploring ways to knock that down. And, with Summit Trail, pretty exciting with just their goal of wanting to have, a larger population of their teachers try UDL and use it regularly. And they reported 100% of teachers are using it, and most of them quite regularly. So, but even still, that's great. What are we learning? What are we learning from that, and what can we do with that to take it to the next level and, be even better at it. And what supports do we need? Both the middle schools talked about needing different kinds of supports and actually having those. At Summit Trail, they talked about the new instructional coach coming in to kind of provide some in-classroom assistance and resources to teachers. And at Maple View, they talked about special ed paras, helping fill in some of the gaps there, and really kind of recognizing that kids are coming from 5th grade where they've got a lot of supports, they've got BIS, they've got check-ins, they've got a lot of those kinds of things that just weren't really existent at the middle school level, and so they're missing out on those supports, and how do we fill that in with the different resources and personnel that we have at the middle level. So that was pretty cool. And then even just to stay on that theme, in the last room, we had Marty Barber and Jen Hessman talking about partnerships, and Marty was really good about pointing out that we've amassed this impressive list of partnerships, but to what end? Like, in service of what? Or in service of who? And diving into that to ask that tough question. Like, good for us, we've got a lot of partnerships. But are they the right partnerships? Are they serving our kids? Are they helping them be successful? So not just being happy with what we've got, but asking the tough questions to take it another level.
You backing up to the 5th to 6th transition and the supports gap that you shared. Did you hear that out of both buildings? Or?
No, that was just from Maple View. Yeah.
Questions for Pete, Haley, Matt?
How are they measuring support? Like, how's it being measured? Whether it's improving or not. It's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
And what they're doing is working, I guess, the best way.
Yeah. One question that I asked of the high school, and it's interesting, they focused a lot on the ESPER program. And Gwendolyn was at Summit Trail, and some of the kids that she was working with at Summit Trail are now at the high school, and she's working with them again. So she's seen them over a 2 to 3 year period. The bookends, not necessarily continuously, but she saw them in 8th grade, she's seeing them in 11th grade. And the questions that they're asking, where their heads at, the things that they've accepted, the things that they're comfortable with now are completely different, and there's growth that's happened in a big way, which was pretty exciting. And the question I asked, which is, again, it's tough to measure, but was the stigma that comes along with mental health and wellness. Everybody has mental health. Sometimes you have good mental health, sometimes you have not so good mental health. But how are we coming, and are we gaining ground on the idea that that's okay? It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to kind of accept that and work through that. And are we gaining ground on that concept amongst the student body? And she kind of acknowledged it's a tough thing to measure, but she pointed out that I am seeing that the kids I was working with in 8th grade have grown and are doing better. So she kind of uses that as a metric. That's just seeing that progression, moving things through. Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering, how important is it for measurement in that? I know we want measurement, but at some point, some things are just so, I guess, what is the goal? Is it a goal that we have measurement of each of these different outcomes, or is that just something that would be kind of nice to have?
Can we put a pin in that?
Okay.
Cool. It's a great question. And we'll get Dawn up here sitting next to me when we dive into that one.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had academic goals, so middle school with high expectations, student supports, mostly focused on high expectations and really about math and ELA, curriculum and their goals. And really, I think the common theme between the middle schools was how important I'm not trying to mess up the academics here and stuff, but the PLCs, the time the teachers have away from the classroom to collaborate, and that was a common theme in the elementary school as well. So I mean, if anything going out of this as a board member, is realizing like, how can we make sure that the teachers have that time? It seems like it's just so vital for their curriculum to be adopted and to be executed properly. more than anything. We could have the right curriculum, but if they don't have that time to collaborate, it seems like we might be missing something and it won't be successful. And then we also talked about, Summer Trail talked about inclusivity and how they brought in making sure, it was Jamie that was speaking, she was talking about how many students went from her program, forgot the program she called it, but into the regular program, curriculum, general curriculum, and making the exit out, and the number of 12, I think it was, and how make those students be inclusive. And we talked about the WASDA conference that we went to, and how important that is for the students to make sure that they feel inclusive, and it really shortens that, decrease the gap, right? That learning gap. So that was really interesting to listen to, and that includes how important it is, and then also Matt on the Mayview Middle School, we talked a lot about the math curriculum and how what they're doing to adopt changes to that, especially on the lower end. Well, not say lower end, but the kids that are failing needs and have kind of students, and how they're doing more. They're talking about their PEAK program, and how that can really show improvement to the students and then really help those that are struggling. And more than anything, I thought from the middle school as well, we talked about it was, and we saw this in the elementary schools, they're building. I say at the end of the day, your guys are building confidence in the kids. Your curriculum is giving them confidence, and that's what the kids need, especially in the math. Right, is developing the confidence that they can go in and tackle this test, tackle this problem. Because that's what it starts with. So we talked a lot about that. On the high school side, we talked about high expectations and more about, Chris talked about the college-bound program they did. And that was just awesome to me. I think another goal is to make sure we know about every single program like that's out there for these kids to be available. It's kind of like what we talked about for all these programs that for the partnership piece that are out there. It's just getting the word out there and getting, and having the knowledge ourselves to know what is out there for these kids to be able to leverage, for future success. So that was awesome brief, but yeah, overall. And then he already talked about the partnership piece, but yeah, really, really good job by Marty.
College bound in particular is a point of pride, the movement we've had on that in the last couple of years, and Dawn's played a big role in that. You guys have questions for Matt?
Matt? Where's Matt?
Matt's back there.
Oh.
I don't know. I can't see my own self, so I'm not even sure I'm in the screen. So.
My bronchitis is getting to me. Sorry, Matt.
It's all right. You're probably with cold meds and all that, so it's fine.
No, I don't know if you guys.
Okay.
Is there a question in there?
She said she doesn't have any questions.
No. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, I guess one of the pieces that I think this reinforces. I'm thinking back to Don. You want to come up here for this part? I'm thinking back to a couple of years ago when we delayed the goal setting. We knew it was the right thing to do, and then in 2021 started to undertake the goal setting process. A huge undertaking during a time when everything's online, but it was the right thing to do, the right work to do at the time, and got us to a spot that gave us Tahoma Cares. And we're still in the middle of the pandemic. We're still facing really challenging logistical issues, I guess would be the best way to say it. But we push forward, and with a massive change in site plan structure that's completely new for all 9 buildings, completely new for our teaching and learning department, and also choose to undertake this department plan process as well at the time. So these are just very large undertakings at a challenging time. And when I look back on what's happened with the site plans over the course of the year, I think we've learned an awful lot about the process. We've learned a lot about some of the structures within them. And there's a lot of places to celebrate. The consistency with which you can go to a building, you can walk in, sit down with the principal, and you get the idea of what you're going to look at. Is there something up in the roof right there?
I think something's alive. Seriously, I think that was a rat or something. A cat or
substantial. But we're in a spot where you can walk into a building, sit with the principal, look at their site plan. You're not going to be surprised by anything. You understand the structure. But I think we're also in a spot where we've seen some of the advantages of how we're doing the department plans, with that depth of why we're doing what we're doing built in, as well as the actions. But probably more important is that measurement tool right there, that piece where, and so that's a piece where, we've been engaging in lots of conversations around, okay, what's this next iteration look like? What is it that puts the board in a position, and all of us in a position, where we're monitoring our progress? And we've got an easy tool to do that. So I asked you to put a pin in it, Haley, because, how important is it to measure was your question. And that was after Matt had, made the comments about supports and systems of supports and how do we measure it. And I think what's nice is that you guys don't have to answer that question. You have people who are really good at figuring those things out. But literally to answer something like that, for systems of supports at its biggest level, when our PLCs are working to identify what the barriers are to a kid's learning, and they identify the barrier, do we have something in place that's a resource to help support that kid overcome the barrier? If so, we're doing great on supports. That's an example of it. So I think for me, and I'll ask Dawn to jump in, but for me, this reinforces what we've been feeling like over the last couple months, which is there's some tweaks that we need to be doing. And the tweaks certainly will support the board in its job in monitoring progress, but they'll also support us in monitoring progress as well, and knowing whether or not our ideas are working, and then quickly, if they're not working, doing something different that will work. So do you want to jump in, Dawn?
Only in that place of, I think, as the clearer that the buildings are around what they're trying to change and how they're doing it, the easier the measurement will come. It doesn't mean all things are easy to measure, because that we know isn't the case, but the clearer they are on their theories of action and what they're trying to do, then the easier it will be for us to say, well, how will we know if we're starting to see early gains, and then what do we expect down the way? Pete, you talked a year and a half ago now about leading and lagging measures, and keeping our eye on what are some of the lagging ones that we're trying to impact, but then more putting our attention on what are those leading ones as they're doing the site plan work. I think will be the place where we see the next, as Mike said, kind of tweak to happen. And I think the department plans where you can see those key actions, and then right there was that idea of a measurement associated with each one of those. That's the direction that we see shifting to.
Yeah, I think we're in a good spot. The other positive I didn't mention is I feel like when we walk into a night like tonight, for the most part, there should be no surprises, because there are things where we've been in the buildings, we've been hearing what's going on, and this is just an opportunity to put it all in one place. And it will be interesting to hear your guys' the 5 board members' conversation in whenever it happens, which I think is in September. But do you guys decide to go a different route with the 5 goals and each one being assigned a goal, or whatever you guys decide to do there? I think that has some potential for sure. So, Haley, any closing thoughts there?
The process has been, in my opinion, incredibly valuable, and really to be able to see the growth over time and also just focusing on that one goal area. So for me, it's really allowed me to get to know the schools under that lens, and really see, you know, how they're tackling the areas that they want more growth in, and yeah, it's been a real benefit.
Thanks. Mr. Miller?
I just would like to echo what you had said about just the last 12 months, what we've done with the site plans, the department plans, and integrating all of the Tahoma Cares things into all of that. It's a massive undertaking to take that on, and it's helpful to just reflect on that, to really understand that, you know, sitting where we are right now, I feel informed. I feel like we're making progress in service of our kids. We're making progress in service of aligning these plans and so forth. But also acknowledging that we're just barely 12 months into this idea, and the places we'll go with the momentum we have. It's pretty cool. And I'm excited for the next cycle to see where we take this thing now that we've kind of got our feet under us. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, it was nice to see this. I'm looking forward to seeing the next iteration, so I can see obviously the change, or, you know, where the movement is. You know, and it's interesting, your point about the goals, and do we adjust them, because Southern Trail did bring that up about, well, the focus was on math and ELA. Do we lose things by not focusing on the science or the other subjects, right? They hinted at that a little bit in their brief, so it was interesting to listen to their piece on that. But they really did focus on extending some of the lessons they learned from math and ELA over those other subjects. So that was important. But yeah, to add into Pete's point, I mean, it's definitely, I get the feeling, and the culture is that I'm missing things, but just maybe they should say brought in their aces to miss meetings. But I feel like everybody's bought into these site plans and the plans that they develop in each school. I feel like the district-wide and from each school-wide, that everybody's bought in. You know, which creates that momentum. And I think if they weren't bought in, it ain't gonna work, right? So I'm feeling like it is bought in, and we will get somewhere even more stronger gains in the future because they are bought in. That's the first step. People have to buy into it. Because you don't have that, you're just not going to know this. I mean, you give me 5 books on it. So I mean, it's you know, so, I mean, I think, and I've seen that by this group that's come in, and I've seen that by going to the schools as well. So I looking forward to the next iteration of this.
Cool. I appreciate that. Dawn, any closing thoughts, man?
No, Michael and I talked a little bit about what he kind of asked for is as a board member, and thinking about, in this case, teaching and learning, and what does that look like in his visit to a couple of schools in September, with looking at engaging with a little bit more with the site plan for that particular building. And so one idea that we talked about is actually going together to a building and thinking about that, and meeting with the principal and just engaging in some conversation. And so I know he and I are going to do that, and he can report back to you guys. I don't know what we'll learn, but I'm sure we're going to learn something cool. And I don't know what his perspective will be from, how similar or different that experience then will be for him as a board member at a building, but he'll be able to tell that story.
I think it'd be very different. I think it's cool. It's a good idea. I think that sort of thinking, like Dawn's sharing there, needs to be a part of our conversation when we get together with the board to talk about the 5 goal areas, and if we redo assignments around that. Like, how can we take advantage of those sorts of things? So, very cool.
I'd like to do almost like a little PLC of our own, talk about how do you do a building visit well? What does that look like? What does a good building visit look like versus versus a not good visit? How long is it? What do you do while you're there? Who are you talking to?
I like that. Sounds like a retreat topic. Where you're going here.
Could be. It's not up to me. You and Miss Howell can figure that out.
Oh, it's getting a magnet.
And I will recognize that the next retreat is on my birthday. It's September 20th, so I'm delighted to be able to spend that entire day with all you fine people. So I know when the next retreat is. Yeah, I've got that figured out. Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to turn it over to you, Acting President Miller, to shut us down.
Yeah, I will join us at 8:15 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Right on time.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great conversation.
Thanks, Haley. Get well.
Thank you.